You're listening to Studio A on WKCR. I'm Chaim Lazaros. BAM is hosting a retrospective of Elliott Gould's work over the past few years. Coming up this Saturday night is one which you really don't want to miss out on. It is, of course, Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, for which Elliott Gould was nominated for the Academy Award in 1969 for Best Supporting Actor. The next year, in 1970, Elliott Gould graced the cover of Time magazine, and the headline read, "Star for an Uptight Age." That is the title of the retrospective, featuring so much of Elliott Gould's work. He's been such a hardworking actor, performed in so many roles, and BAM has recognized this man's contribution to the arts and is doing this great retrospective. Also coming up at BAM is California Split on Sunday the 17th, then I Love My Wife on Monday, August the 18th, Getting Straight on Tuesday, August 19th, and Harry and Walter Go to New York is going to be on Wednesday, August 20th, 9:15 p.m. These are all at BAM Cinematheque. Again, the retrospective of Elliott Gould's work is called Star for an Uptight Age. I had a chance to sit down with Elliott Gould on the streets of Brooklyn, and let's just have a listen to that interview for the next 45 minutes. This is Studio A. I'm Chaim Lazaros. Enjoy. So I'm here with acclaimed actor Elliott Gould on the streets of Brooklyn. You may be able to hear the noise of children playing on the stoops outside. Elliott, thanks so much for doing this interview and joining me this morning.
Oh, hi. It's my pleasure.
Okay, so let's just give the audience a background. Of course, I gave a brief intro, but tell me a little bit about what BAM is trying to do here and the retrospective.
BAM has organized perhaps 10 films that I appear in, and is having a retrospective of this part of my work, and have brought me here to Brooklyn, back to Brooklyn, to introduce two of the films and to do question and answers after each screening.
And of course, you grew up in Brooklyn, so what's it like to be back here?
It's lovely to be back. I was conceived in Far Rockaway, but I was born in Brooklyn and been brought up in Brooklyn, and so it's great to be back here and to be greeted and embraced by the Brooklyn Academy of Music as a native artist who has been working at my craft and art and business for a lifetime.
So now you've done countless films, Broadway performances, plays. Let's just take it all the way back if we can. Did you always know that you wanted to be a performer, wanted to be an actor? How'd you get started in this business?
I found my balance on the boardwalk of Far Rockaway in 1939, and learned to walk shortly after that. I would say, just like any other one of us, that we were begun and established by our parents. I used to like to listen to the radio, and I used to like to go to movies, and I pursued that vocation.
And so what was your first performance? When was the first time you were in front of an audience, acting or singing? What's the story there?
Well, I was rather shy and repressed and inhibited, and as were some other children at that time. And my parents brought me to a neighborhood school for children to learn to sing and dance. And so I learned tap dancing routines, learned to recite and my first performances were with a group of children who sang and danced. After I got into song and dance as a child, I continued to study and to work at that. I went to public school in Bensonhurst to PS 247, and then the 7th grade I went to Sethlow Junior High. And when I was in the 7th grade, I got a job. Somebody came to the studio where the children of different ages were learning their routines, and to choose someone to be in somebody else's act, a vaudeville act. And I played the Palace. That's a train I used to have to take the subway into Manhattan from Brooklyn and back. And so at the age of 12, I met some teachers who were a bit more sophisticated, who took me on, a ballet teacher and a sophisticated tap teacher. And I continued my studies, and I then was brought to a school in New York for the 8th grade called the Professional Children's School, which was a private school. I didn't work, but I was able to get some work there, and I did a play in Woodstock, New York, called Some Little Honor. The first play I did prior to that was a children's production of Tom Sawyer, and I played Joe Harper, who was a friend of Tom Sawyer's. And so I did Some Little Honor in Woodstock. That was the name of the play. And then I continued and graduated high school. And at 16, then I took my entrance exams to Columbia University, and I was accepted, but I didn't go, and I went into the chorus of a television show called The Ernie Kovacs Show. And then I auditioned for Broadway shows to be in the chorus, and I was able to obtain a position in my first Broadway show. Was called Rumple. Played the Alvin Theater, which since has been renamed the Neil Simon Theater. And then shortly after that, I got my second show called Say Darling. And in Say Darling, I was the third assistant stage manager, and I sang and danced in the chorus, and I also had a very small role of Earl Jorgensen. And then I continued to pursue studies in modern dance and jazz, and studied voice. Didn't study acting. And then I got into a production, a show at Jones Beach called Hit the Deck, and I was in the chorus. And then I got into the Broadway production of Irma La Douce, which was directed by Peter Brook, who is still a great, innovative, avant-garde theatrical director. And while I was in Irma La Douce, I auditioned for the leading role in a musical called I Can Get It to You Wholesale. And after months of auditions, I got the job. And then after that, I took a job in the London production, the West End production of On the Town, the Leonard Bernstein, Comden and Green show On the Town, and played a principal role in that. And then came back to America, and eventually got my first movie, and then got another movie, and then did some more theater, and then did my third movie was Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, in which I came to notice and then made a great many pictures after that.
So, I mean, have you been singing a lot since you started doing movies?
No, I haven't. I'm thinking about finding a voice teacher, because I think that's very healthy, you know. And I've been offered some musicals, and also I've been offered some plays, and I think that it's a good idea to, just like I go to the gym and work out and exercise, I think it's a good idea to exercise my vocal instrument, and so I intend to find someone to help me.
Of this retrospective that's going to be happening right now in BAM, is there a particular screening that you're really looking forward to and that you really want people to check out and you're really excited that is playing again on the big screen?
Well, each one of the films that BAM has acquired, had chosen and acquired, is meaningful to me. Each one is a specific individual part of my life and my work. I have a very good recall and strive not to exaggerate, not to distort, to keep things in order. I get very enthusiastic, so sometimes my enthusiasm is judged for other thoughts. But the two films that I'm going to be introducing myself, and I'd like to have been able to introduce every film, and I'd like to have been able to introduce every screening of every film, since they are all so meaningful to me. Not that they're so great, you know, I mean, they're movies. But tonight I'm going to introduce Little Murders and then do questions and answers afterwards. It has a great deal of significance and meaning to me. I had appeared and acted in the original production of Jules Feiffer's Little Murders on stage in New York. And then I was privileged to produce this film. I produced Little Murders with a partner at the time. This was the first film that I produced. Tomorrow night I'm introducing The Long Goodbye, which is a film that was directed by Robert Altman, and the second film that Robert Altman and I did together. And it has a great deal of meaning and significance to me. I'll be introducing it, and I also will be doing question and answers afterwards. This retrospective will end with the film that I did with Ingmar Bergman. I was chosen and privileged to be the first one of us, the first American, to work with him in his first English-speaking picture called The Touch. And it has an enormous amount of meaning to me. It was an incredible experience. And in its time, it wasn't so embraced nor recognized. There were great expectations for it in terms of our collaboration. And even in his book, The Magic Lantern, in hindsight, Bergman dismissed this picture. But it's a masterpiece. And I believe that a grain of pride is good for the heart, but no more than that. Pride can be blinding. But where Ingmar would call me his little brother, I said, but Ingmar, I'm a head taller than you are. And he said, I'm too vain to call you my younger brother. So it's more than just meaningful. And years later, when I had met Bibi Anderson, who's the woman in it, again. She said, "What happened? Nothing ever happened from that picture. Nothing ever happened. Nothing. We didn't gain anything from it." And I said, "But don't give up. Don't settle for that." I said, "This is a very long gestation. At that time, it was 23 years. Now it's even longer. There are some things that take forever to be recognized and to come into life, and that's part of what this is about." And I'm extremely gratified that I sent my 35 millimeter print here, and it's arguably the only 35 millimeter print in North America. Last year, I sent it to a film festival in Port Townsend, Washington State, and I looked at it for the first time with an American audience, with an audience that wanted to see it, with an audience that was open to it without being jammed by preconceptions as to what it was supposed to be. And I'm extremely proud of it.
You mentioned that you produced Little Murders and that this is your first foray into production. Can you talk to me a little bit about the story behind this? When was this? What prompted you as a performer to start to try to produce as well?
Well, this was the late 60s, and I had, as I said, been cast and played in the original Broadway production of Little Murders. And then, as it appeared that I might have a career, and of course, my wife at the time was and still is no longer my wife, but mother of my child, my first child, Barbara Streisand, was a major star, and so I had some degree of entry in the business, and Little Murders interested me as being something different and something that was making a social statement as to the value system in our world, especially here in New York, or a big city. And I sent a letter to Jean-Luc Godard in France, who responded to say that his two favorite American authors were Schultz, who made Peanuts, and Jules Feiffer, who was a renowned political cartoonist. And so we agreed to meet at Berkeley. At that time, my wife at that time was doing a concert in San Francisco, so I was there in Northern California. I was able to meet Jean-Luc Godard. And he said, "Why do you want to do this?" He said to me, and I said, "Because I think it will be good." And so then we got involved, and we hired writers who started to work on it. And we just could go so far, and we weren't able to do it. But at that point, a off-Broadway production of Little Murders gained some recognition and success, and it was directed by Alan Arkin. And actually, Chris Guest was in it. He played the younger brother. And so we decided to be a bit more conventional with it, and I was able to work out a deal to hire Alan and to bring Jules back in, for Jules to write the screenplay, Jules Feiffer, and for us to make Little Murders in New York. And it's a highlight for me being that producing the film, I mean, it's called a Elliott Gould production, and my partner at the time was a publicist named Jack Brodsky, who I had met in Hollywood, but also came from Brooklyn, and we got along quite well. And but that was Little Murders was my project, and we were able to produce it. And I look forward to seeing it actually with the audience tonight.
Mm-hmm. Speaking of production, of course, you grew up Jewish in Brooklyn, and a lot of other Jewish names were getting known. Most notably, you worked with Woody Allen a little bit, and I believe that you bought the rights to the book "Everything You Always Wanted About Sex, But Were Afraid to Ask." Can you just tell me a little bit about how you two met and the story there?
Well, Woody Allen was going with Louise Lasser when Barbara and I were doing I Can Get It For You Wholesale. Louise Lasser was the understudy to Barbara. Barbara played Miss Marmalstein, who was the secretary of the character I played, Harry Bogan. And I was aware of Woody. He was an interesting stand-up comedian. And I knew that he had been a staff writer on a show of shows, along with Mel Brooks and other fabulous comic genius minds. And at the time of Little Murders, and where I had then been nominated for an Academy Award for Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, I had made a major breakthrough as Trapper John McIntyre in MASH, and I had done a film called Getting Straight, which is also here at BAM, which I'm very pleased with. It hasn't been put on a DVD yet, but I hope to be able to accomplish that. So I was Jack Brodsky mentioned Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, but was afraid to ask. It was a book by, I think his name was David Rubin. And because of, I think cadre, it may be a word, cadre is, I usually have a dictionary with me, because I don't, sometimes it's awkward for me and sensitive about exposing my ignorance or a part of me that's not so formally educated. I think cadre has a meaning. I have to find it out. And so we were able to acquire the rights. Because at that time, it appeared that I could do almost anything I thought of. And there were two filmmakers, two young directors and new directors who wanted to do it. I had no concept for it. I really didn't think too much of it. My mind wasn't there. But in terms of the business, Woody Allen and Rob Reiner, I was told they wanted to do it. And Woody was always my favorite. Woody just so romantic and so funny and so wonderful artist. And so we gave it to Woody, and Woody made Everything You Always Wanted to Know About Sex, But Was Afraid to Ask, which was the second picture I was involved with as a producer. And it's a very funny picture.
Now, of course, you're not as well known as a producer, and of course, more well known as an actor. In fact, now you sit on the Screen Actors Guild National Board of Directors. Can you tell me a little bit about what that's like and what your responsibilities or day-to-day is there?
Well, I wasn't a business person or businessman. I'm understanding it now. And through the course of my work and career, and of course my first priority is the health and welfare of my family. Therefore, I have, like most of us, all of us, a responsibility to earn a living and make a living. And so the only entity that had appropriated anything for my family and me was my union. I belong to several unions, but the Screen Actors Guild, where I've done most of my work and earned the majority of the money that I've been able to earn, has a pension and welfare. And I thought, one has just so many fertile years to be able to work or to be able to play a role and make a living in this industry, in this business, just like athletes. And that the pension and welfare, that which the union had and has and does offer its members, you have to work and you have to contribute to it. That I wanted to finally see how it worked, who was who, and where things were at. So I got involved, and not knowing how political it is and how divisive the politics are, and being that I'm somewhat of a centrist, but the people that I have worked with and have learned from are activists, and I would say, are activists. So I even allowed myself to be elected, to run and be elected as a national officer some years ago as the National Recording Secretary. But I have no ambition to hold office or to do that. And I did, and and it is a responsibility, and there is a fiduciary responsibility in relation to my being on the board of directors and having that's a position that is voted on. So I'm elected to it along with the rest of us on the board. I'm also on the board of directors of the Screen Actors Guild Foundation, which is a charitable organization. And, we have enormous problems internally in relation to diverse perspectives as to what is right for the union and how the union behaves and where the industry is at. And even at the very moment, right now, whereas our contract has expired, and we have more than that as a problem. The directors made a deal with management. The writers struck, as you should know, for 100 days, which is very expensive and painful and caused a great deal of anguish to a lot of people because there are other industries and other businesses and livelihoods that count on and rely on our work. And then that was settled. The actors from the Screen Actors Guild were very much aligned with the writers. And then we have always negotiated together with the AFTRA, the association, the American Federation of Television and Radio Artists, of which I'm a member too. But most of the people there are announcers and are people who do soap operas. It's not film, it's not prime time. And we've had problems with AFTRA, as AFTRA has had problems with us. For years, there's been movements and attempts to consolidate, and we came close to consolidating, but I didn't feel or believe that things were sufficiently worked out or sufficiently structured in relation to the Screen Actors Guild maintaining its sovereignty. And so we didn't ever consolidate. And then, just recently, after it broke off from us, and they made a deal with management, leaving us alone to deal with management. And therefore, our public relations isn't so great. But I do believe that what we're asking for is not unjust and is not unreasonable. And at this point, we're at a stalemate. And I don't think we'll strike, but in order to strike, there has to be a referendum, and there has to be a 75% vote, at least 75% of membership to vote for it. And I think that there's a great degree of ambivalence and fear, but that's always the case when it comes to the relationship or the conflict between the union and management. One of the major things that we have internally that is a problem is that there is a group of people in the union who feel that there should be something called qualified voting, being that we have 120,000 members in the Screen Actors Guild, and the majority don't work, and the majority don't make a union, but they pay dues, and they join. And people feel because we rise and fall, as far as I'm concerned, with our rank and file. And I believe as a unionist, and I feel this way about life on Earth, that no one of us is any more significant than the least of us. And that breaks down and comes down to what I believe about nature as well. It's something that we haven't learned. It's something that we haven't accomplished in relation to the environment and ecosystems. And so there's a great movement and great dissension within our membership as to some people saying you can't vote unless you make enough money. And I think that that's not what the union is about. And we have serious problems about that. So it's interesting. I'm learning about how it works.
No, I very much agree. I think it's very interesting because, of course, you are an actor, and you are, some would say, the actor's actor. But you did have this foray into production. So, do you kind of view actors differently as some other actors might have because you were on the other side of the coin?
That could be a trap to view anybody differently than yourself. Could be a real pitfall. And I think that it's important to recognize that there are diverse interests, but then it's also what is essential, what is the order of things. And I believe that it's necessary for us to have administrative organization. Otherwise, it's in relation to making order. I had a very serious problem, which was at the root of my having fallen out of favor at a specific time and having to give up a great portion of time and confidence in relation to this career. And my problem was fundamentally my inability and unwillingness to compromise. And therefore leadership is so essential. And where we don't have leadership, or where our leadership is not just questioned, but fragile or questionable, then it would be the responsibility of the public to really come to bat and to support the system. This is complicated, in relation to the politics of that. I'm very grateful that I do not have political ambitions.
So let's go back. Let's go back to acting, into your career for a second. Let's step away from the politics. You've worked with so many great actors and directors. Is there anyone in particular? I know it's hard to pinpoint just one, but perhaps there's a certain somebody who you could highlight who you particularly learned a very valuable lesson from, and what was that?
I've recently become friendly with Coach John Wooden, who was the storied, iconic coach of the UCLA Bruins and won national championship after national championship after national championship. And Coach is now going on 98. And he's one of the very few people I've really wanted to meet. And he told me that he was an English teacher in his younger days in Indiana. And then he said that the most important word in the English language is love. And then he said, and the second most important word, and I thought, I didn't know there was another word, is balance. That is just extremely valuable to me.
Okay. Was when you produced Little Murders, which was directed by Alan Arkin, was that your first time working with him?
With Alan Arkin?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I had seen him do Love, and I'd seen him in several films, and although he wasn't my first choice, he was very good. Gordon Willis was our cinematographer, and Gordon had done one or two films, or very few films before this. And Gordon went on to photograph The Godfather and Manhattan. And Gordon's camera operator was Michael Chapman, who went on to be the cinematographer of Raging Bull and went on to direct Tom Cruise in All the Right Moves. So when you talk about being an actor has to perform. An actor is a player, and I thrive and thrilled with and by team play, to be a part of a team, to be able to participate and work with people who have the same goal. And that's where it's great. I love to play. I really love to play. I'm an okay actor. I always will be a student of life. And I also believe that I very much appreciate philosophy. So there's two things that I'll share with you now. One is that I believe there's nothing of value other than what we have to share. And it's one thing to share goodness and accomplishment, and it's another thing to share a problem. And once people are willing and capable of communicating directly like this, we could see that no one of us can have a problem that one of us didn't have before. Mother and father. And this is
again?
What?
You say the other thing is?
The other thing is, or another thing is, when mother and father would talk to me about health, we were always frightened, and we still are frightened, and we get anxious as a species, as a being. There are other lives and forms and species that don't have time to think as much as we think. And yet, as far as the emotions, are extremely reactive and responsive. And so mother and father talked to me about health. And I said to them, when you talk to me about health, I feel that you're talking to me about something that's material. Oh, health. And health to me is peace of mind. And I believe that I have some, that I've earned some, that I've made some. And we are at war with ignorance, desperation, and fear. And being at war with ignorance, desperation, and fear, I couldn't ever imagine or believe or think that one like me could get to the front and participate. And I'm here. And I've been there. And I'm also there. And again, being at war with ignorance and desperation and fear, if my body is blown away, but my mind is working and my heart is beating, I'm not ever going to call for help. It's taken me forever to get here, and I want to know that I'm giving everything. So when we are so influenced by fear, by thought, by doubt, by ignorance, by what influences us, that is such a challenge to us to be able to embrace it, to be able to even to love it, love what hurts us the most, so as we can absorb it. Life can absorb it. Life absorbs it all. Not to be so in love with our form, not to be so vain, not to be so egotistical. What do we think we are? I mean, I could weep. All of us could weep if we had the time, or would weep. It's healthy to weep in relation to what are we? We are in love with what we are, what we think we are. So to be able to perform, to be able to exhibit behavior and thought through performance, we all do it. We all do it in our own way. The way you wear your hat, you know.
Well, definitely something to think about. We're waxing philosophical. Of course, you are Jewish. You're very strongly Jewish. Growing up in Brooklyn, with a lot of these other Jewish actors on the car ride here, we were talking about Tisha B'Av and how you're involved in the Chabad telethon. Do you think that growing up Jewish has strongly influenced these philosophies that you currently have and the way you are heading towards these charitable works?
Well, of course, I have no choice but to be what I am. And I don't, it's not in my nature, it's not in my spine, it's not in to deny my roots. Nobody can tell me that one can be better than another one. But I know what I am, and I accept what I am. A few years ago, I was asked to participate in a staged reading for the New York Jewish Theater of a play called Mir Sharim. And you know Mir Sharim in Jerusalem, right?
Sure.
And to play the ultra-Orthodox Rebbe. And I did. And I learned so much. I learned so much. I can see, in a way, that nothing has meaning. And I know that everything has meaning. And therefore, we talked about compromise. We talked about how to learn to accept and understand one another in relation to continuing to make time so we can learn more about coming and going and evolution. And so, yeah, it means a lot to me. There's a book called The Jew and the Lotus. It's nonfiction about a group of Jewish scholars, academics who went to India to meet with the Dalai Lama and Buddhist scholars and to talk about survival in exile.
Well, on of course this subject of time, as we just saw, we're running out of it. But of course, life does come full circle, and Elliott Gould, you're here back in Brooklyn, back here at BAM, and I just want to thank you for doing this interview with us today.
Thank you, Chaim. Thank you very much. I enjoyed the privilege and opportunity to talk with you. Difficult, but that's why it's good to earn a living and to be able to live your own life and find your own place and be able to keep up with working with people and integrating.
Thanks so much again to my guest, acclaimed actor Elliott Gould, for sitting down with me on the stoops, on the streets of Brooklyn, back to his native homeland, to talk about his career, philosophy, Judaism, and everything we did touch upon on the program tonight. It's Studio A. I'm Chaim Lazaros. Thanks again for tuning in. Thanks again to my guest, Elliott Gould, acclaimed actor, Academy Award nominee, appeared in over 100 films, A Bridge Too Far, Capricorn 1, The Lady Vanishes, American History X, Oceans 11, 12, 13, Bugsy. The list goes on and on. MASH. It was an honor and a pleasure to speak with him. Please do check out the retrospective of his work, happening now until the 21st at BAM Cinematheque in Brooklyn. Most importantly, definitely check out Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice. That's happening on Saturday, August the 16th, screenings at 3, 6, and 9 p.m. That was the role for which he was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1969. Also check out California Split, I Love My Wife, Getting Straight, Harry and Walter Go to New York, and lastly, of course not leastly, the final showing will be Thursday, August 21st, The Touch, directed by Ingmar Bergman. The first time that Ingmar Bergman collaborated with an American actor, and that actor was Elliott Gould. Thanks again for tuning in. I'm Chaim Lazaros. This is Studio A on 89.9 FM in New York, WKCR.